Our session today is all about Gen Z, how to communicate with them, keep them engaged, and prepare them for the workforce. It is my pleasure to introduce our guests for this session, Julie Stevens and Kim Brewster. Julie Stevens is an associate professor in the Department of Sport Management and director of the Center for Sport Capacity at Brock University, as well as author of the new first Canadian edition of Business Communication, Developing Leaders for the Networked World. And Kim Brewster is Customer Insights and Research Manager for McGraw-Hill, where she studies trends and innovations in ed tech, talks with instructors and students about how they teach and learn, which in turn informs how we develop content and platforms to help students succeed. Welcome, Julie and Kim. We're really happy you're both here today to share your insights. Kim, I'm going to throw it over to you to start us off with some research about Gen Z.
Mute first. Good afternoon and thanks for joining. To give you a bit of background, as Patty pointed out, I'm responsible for educational research in Canada with both instructors and students. Listed on the screen here are some of the more recent forums that I've drawn on for this presentation, and they've taken place over the past 2 to 3 years across various disciplines and platforms, new software innovations and product ideas. One of the best parts of my job is talking with students, and this has been one of my favorite and most interesting studies. I've gathered together some data and quotes to help us understand the current students in higher ed, the students that you're teaching right now. And for any parents on the line, you may recognize your kids in here. So this is Gen Z. Here's where they sit in the generational grid, which is a composite of my own findings, plus a bunch of other grids that you might find online. We see the social markers of their generation, such as COVID-19, truth and reconciliation, and Black Lives Matter. We also see behaviors, learning styles, leadership styles, influencers, and some thoughts around consumption. And this gives us a good idea of the mindset and attitudes of this generation. Of course, when we talk about an entire group of people or a generation, there's a lot of generalization. But I think we can move along and explore some of these ideas a little bit more in depth. So this slide is designed for us. It's designed for the generations before Gen Z. It's clean, it's clear, it's plain words and data. And this is how we, as educators and older generations, describe Gen Z. They are more racially and ethnically diverse than previous generations. They're the most well-educated, yet the least physically active. They are digital natives who have had little to no memory of the world before smartphones. Some would say they lack situational awareness. I think they're very dependent on their devices. If you've ever asked a Gen Z for directions, you know that it's Google Maps or nothing. They value individual expression and uniqueness. You do you is the mantra that we hear. Their self-identity is less constructed by gender than for past generations. Share, co-create, and commune are 3 of the most descriptive actions of their generation. They will mobilize for a variety of causes to create community. They believe in the efficacy of dialogue to solve conflicts, and they make decisions in a highly analytical and pragmatic way, especially when it relates to institutions. So they're also more likely than previous generations to be enrolled in higher education and to have a higher educated parent, to not have a job as a teen or a young adult because they're pursuing educational endeavors. They, on the whole, agree with same-sex and interracial marriage, and they are more likely to know someone who is gender fluid or who uses gender neutral pronouns. Now, this slide is designed for Gen Z. It's visual, it's colorful, it's very busy. It communicates through pictures. There's a lot to look at. And it tells us a little bit about how Gen Z describes themselves. So very authentic. They value authenticity. This may be their defining quality. We see the girl in the middle holding the Dunkin' Donuts cup. This is Charli D'Amelio. She's an influencer and the first TikTok creator to amass 100 million followers. And so she's a great example of this. No one knows why she is so big. There's nothing particularly special about her. That's probably why she is so popular. She is your everyday 16-year-old from suburbia, and she's very approachable. Yet she was canceled by Gen Z in November 2020 after uploading a video that was offensive. And this was after she was paid $1 million to appear in a Super Bowl ad. So Gen Zs are 100% loyal until they're not. And then in comes cancel culture. They're community centric. Both baby boomers and millennials have been called the me generation. They prioritize self-realization and self-fulfillment. But Gen Z, by contrast, is the we generation, and they are sharing everything, deeply focused on building inclusive communities. Radically inclusive. For previous generations, consumption was more about possession or status. For Gen Zs, consumption is about buying access to a community that they want to belong to. They care about building strong and close-knit communities, and diversity is embraced and celebrated. It's lovely to see. Gender is a really interesting example here. We see in the bottom right-hand corner, Billie Eilish, who is one of Gen Z's biggest musical stars. She's relatively genderless in the way that she dresses and in her behavior. She completely defies industry norms of how women should look and act. And her style embodies the generation's attitude towards genderless, less binary and more fluid. And if we look at advertising, 48% of Gen Zs say that they value brands that don't distinguish between male and female. So it gives us some good insights. Playful, joyful, serendipitous, they take themselves a lot less seriously than previous generations, especially online. You see really natural, random pictures, blurry, double chin. It doesn't matter if there's bad lighting. It's fun, it's natural, it's authentic. And they're quirky. They've learned that traditional choices don't always guarantee success. So they're very progressive in their outlooks, especially around government and environment and social norms. Total foodies. They've learned we've learned that food rates very high on their passion list. And we've also learned that they're more sedentary than previous generations, but they are 100% body positive. So you do you, unapologetic, be who you want to be. It's pretty refreshing. Scrappy and entrepreneurial, they're surrounded and have grown up with do-it-yourself education and crowdsourcing. So we see these teens really monetizing their passions. They dream of self-employment. They want to build this dream with individuality and flexibility, less idealistic and more practical, and also ethical and empathetic, intent on doing the right thing for others, for their community, for their climate. There's no outsiders. People aren't weirdos. They're individuals. Everyone is valued and everyone belongs. And also mature and in control. So yes, the amazing Amanda Gorman is also a typical Gen Z. High achiever, very focused, wants to make a difference and change the world. And we see this reflected in teen volunteering votes, volunteering rates being very high, and social entrepreneurism being one of the top career choices. What do they stand for? Friends and community. So as I mentioned, online and personal communities. Influencers that we've discussed, they turn to influencers for advice on news and comedy and fashion and trends. Passion and interests for this age group, sports, music, food, fitness, the environment, social causes, thrifting. So what's old is new again, really interesting. Creativity, dating for fun and not marriage. Concerns and fears is an interesting one, though. They're very anxious and concerned about their finances. And then we learn another acronym for us, which is FOBO. I had not heard of this one, but it's fear of being offline. And a quote that I had from a student was, no joke, if you've ever had that panic of leaving home without your cell phone, you know that this is real. Absolute dread. Multiply that by 1 million, and that's me when I can't get online. So you can see the importance of real-time communication and response with this generation as educators. Once we understand this, that maybe it's not a barrier to communication. It's a green light to keep a steady barrage of short and visually driven messages moving towards these students. Technology, true digital natives from birth. And I like the idea of constant seekers of new media, a hyper-cognitive generation. The volume, variety, even velocity with which Gen Z likes to have information headed at them will make your head spin. We clearly can't use the same old media. They like to communicate with images. So anything that takes time to digest, long form readings, static websites, text heavy emails, even, it won't attract the same quality or quantity of Gen Z students that we need. Even videos, if they're too long, won't get it done. 6 to 8 seconds is the average attention span, which is frightening. It's down from 2000, where it was 12 seconds, which is still frightening. These students know how to train the algorithms in their social media, so they can purposefully like and comment and share specific posts to give them that desired content feed. They're maybe not tech geniuses, but their heavy usage creates very tech-enabled teens. Data privacy isn't questioned much, and it provides a false sense of security through familiarity. What will the future look like for this generation? Something to consider for these data oversharers, that even deleted information lives forever, and it can be repurposed and shared across the internet. This generation has always known how to zoom and pinch and swipe, and high def and surround sound, 3D, even 4D is their tech tastes are so sophisticated. Even though they don't take themselves that seriously online, they take their tech super serious. And they have very little time for media that doesn't display well on their phone. So this is the on-demand generation. They're constantly consuming, whether they're looking at it or they're listening to it. And so how do we communicate? They're very agile communicators, and speed is their currency. So to quote one of the students that we talked to, no one understands our generation like we do. So instead of talking about us, you need to start talking to us. The interesting thing is that they have their own language, emoticons, emojis, glyphs. It's often really hard to understand or even decipher their own language. So if we look at some of the emojis, that what they're intended to mean and what Gen Z actually uses them for, and then you factor in no punctuation, no capital letters, very little grammar, hyper speed, it's understandable that we may not always interpret them correctly. So one really important fact that I would take out of this is that because of the nature of their language and communication patterns, they leave a lot of room for interpretation. So how does that affect you as an educator? Does it change the way that you give instructions for assignments? Would it impact deliverables? It's just a very different way of communicating. And social media. Wow, there's so much to say about this. So to put it briefly, 45% of teens say that they are online almost constantly. 44% are online several times a day. 49% get all of their news from social media. And they can also use social media as a weapon to communicate with each other, to raise awareness, to mobilize, to create and influence change. It's a very powerful generation. And TikTok is where it's at right now. 60% of users of TikTok are Gen Z. And it gets the most attention for reinventing content consumption. But it was equally groundbreaking on content creation. So YouTube was the first channel to democratize creation. Anyone in theory could make a video and post it. But you needed expensive equipment, and TikTok leveled this field. You know, it's anyone can borrow each other's sounds, use their green screen. Every piece of content becomes a potential building block. So 1 in 1,000 YouTube users also post to the site. 83% of TikTok users post to the site. So this is where you need to be to understand Gen Z. Also YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat are very popular. Facebook, not so much now because that's what their mom uses. Sorry, moms, not cool anymore. But we talk Gen Z at school. We would focus on inclusive classrooms and differentiated instruction. So it's classroom diversity. They're typically a very collaborative team players. Everyone is equal at winning and losing. They grew up with Tim Hortons hockey and soccer leagues, no winners, no losers. Sometimes everyone gets a medal, no scoring. So we would call them the ultimate consumers of snack media. They consume in bite sizes. They best consume chunked information. The TL semicolon DR is everywhere. Too long, didn't read. It's their motto. Very, very important to know for teaching. So research studies suggest that their brains have actually evolved to process more information at faster speeds, and they're cognitively more nimble to handle bigger mental challenges. But to get and keep their education, their attention is very challenging. If you remember that 8-second attention span. So we know for school that over 90% of teens use YouTube as their primary platform for new information to research a typical assignment. We know that visually enhanced mixed media, including mobile and video, are their go-to platforms for learning. We know that Gen Z crave autonomy. So self-paced, somewhat self-directed learning and independent with the freedom of how they learn and what they learn. These students may enjoy learning in a social setting with others, but they prefer working on their own. For example, in the classroom, group learning where they can choose their friends and their group and discuss the topics is great. But when you move that group work online and assign the groups or force discussions on boards, they don't like that so much. The bite-sized learning you have to look at as time efficient rather than time consuming. Active learning, so learn by doing, experiences and activities are really key. So I would say if you want to reach a Gen Z, make it personal. They're individualistic in their ways and they're very tech savvy, but the preferred communication style is in person. And one of their primary motivators is relationships. So you think of Netflix and Spotify, it's very personalized. So personalize their learning through technology, or the approach is ideal as well. They love social media assignments that meet them where they are. And also essential to remember for education that the quality of their education will be forever altered by where we are right now in COVID. So necessary remote learning, it may be convenient and they can do it from their couch, but that doesn't mean that they like it. Quickly on career readiness. One study found that 54% of Gen Zs want to create their own company. They want to work from home. They want the flexibility. And, an example, TikTok recently, there's a new competitor to TikTok called Triller, and they hired TikTok's biggest star to become their chief strategy officer. So this is the kind of stories we're going to hear now because Gen Zers are now entering the workforce. They're making it their mission and trying to make it a career to help everyone better understand their generation and market and sell to their generation. The top left-hand corner, you see Tiffany Zong. She is Zebra IQ's CEO and co-founder. She's 22 years old, and this is her 6th business venture. She is a serial entrepreneur, and this is the kind of student that we're going to see. Poshmark is an environment that a lot of Gen Zs are on. It lets them express their individuality, but also hustle and earn some income by reselling clothes and reselling all kinds of stuff. This is somewhere that people spend 27 minutes a day on, this kind of marketplace. They don't click in and out. If you take a quick zip through Instagram, and you'll see countless sites of Gen Zs with their own little home business, selling their clothes and their art and collaborating. Zorro, which helps you track your carbon footprint, or Calm, which helps you manage your mental health and relaxation. These are the kind of careers that we're going to see that are flexible and empathetic and diverse. So that takes me, I think, way over my time. But the slides will be available after. So the key takeaways that I would say, show the communication between what the skill is and where that will lead them for working. Appeal to advocacy and making a difference and altruism. Diversity matters, and embracing a personal device can ensure that you will reach them. Experiential learning and individual products that focus on digital content creation are very appealing. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you for your time and for listening, and I'll pass it over to Julie.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay? Patty, would you mind bringing up the slides for me and just rotating through, or Kim can maybe.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sorry, I can go through those.
So as we get set up and queued up here, I'd like to say thank you to everyone for joining, and thank you very much to Patty, Alex, and Kim for supporting this webinar, letting me get involved and share some ideas very straightforward, kind of quickly with you today. This is a little piece of what I'll walk through in the second half, and the big part I'd like to say is I'm going to look at engagement as skill development as engagement in your course. So the ideas I'm going to share are going to be, how would you integrate the two? So build a skill, look at skill development in your course, while at the same time trying to make parts of your course more engaging. From Kim's summary, I think, we've just practiced the first important principle of business communication, which is do an audience analysis of who you're trying to communicate with. So now that you understand so much about the learners we now both have in university and college, you can start to think back from this is what they prefer to what do I need to do in the course, and all the other pieces you have as part of your course, and making those try and align better to these preferences of the Generation Z. The big ones for me that come out of this are crowdsourcing, how they like to generate content and knowledge alongside the subject matter you have to cover anyways in your course. The co-creation, certainly, you know, open education resources that are out there are kind of at this idea, but what we try and do with the textbooks in McGraw-Hill is really find ways to complement the textbook and complement the Connect stuff that you do with ways to reuse, remix, revise, recycle all the information students are learning. So that other co-create, and then the idea of community, which is really, really big. So to kick off here with teaching approach, I think we're both in this middle balance ground as instructors. So on one hand, we have subject matter we have to cover in our courses, and we have the program agenda of our majors and what they cover when they take our courses and all the other courses in our program. As we look at this idea of skill development, one of the biggest challenges I've faced in my own philosophy is how to integrate that into my course, knowing it's going to take time and energy from delivering strictly my subject matter material. So we do know from some views around how to integrate this idea of skill development as part of your own philosophy, that the more practical use of material is for students, the better they seem to learn from it. So the practical now is about the skill development and how that can be done through learning the course material. So finding that balance across the two, it does take time out of your course. So just to give you an idea, in one course I teach, if it's 12 weeks at 3 hours a week, the good old formula when we were face-to-face, 36 hours, I have spent up to 4 or 5 hours in the course of face time with students, giving them instruction to build their skill sets to execute some of the assignments and so on. So I may have someone come in and do a really detailed Audacity or podcast webinar software session on skill development for technology so that they can execute better at the assignment. Okay, next slide, please, Kim. On the curricular design side, moving further into the kinds of skills that the learners would like to develop. So right now we know there's a lot of information on the workforce, on changing trends in sectors and industries, about the kinds of skills needed, the jobs that are available, and then the mismatch, that there's this skills gap that workers aren't able to match up with the positions. So if you take a look at that to understand out of the program you're teaching, what are the important skills your majors need for this workforce and how can they bridge that skills gap, it'll have them hit the ground running a little quicker on graduation. And then of course you can always ask the students what skills they would like to develop. And I always work off of the Conference Board of Canada employability skills. There's 11 of them under 3 categories. Quite often I'll ask students about them using that list of 11 so I have a better starting point and get a sense on what I would like to target in the class. The last one on this, as you decide to move with a bit more skill development in the course, is draw on the resources of people you have at your institution. So there are people at Brock, we have a student success center, we have A to Z learning. They offer different kinds of workshops on different skills. Actually bring them into your class or ask them to deliver this virtually now if you have to, or back when we get to face again, have them come into your class. Because these kinds of instructions are important. So Kim mentioned the Gen Z being digital natives. Well, I almost would throw that out to say there's a little bit of a myth there when you have them working with the technology in the course that you're trying to use for engagement. For example, they're very good tech consumers, but they're not excellent at tech users. So they may enjoy social media and so on, but to sort out, we use Sakai as our learning management system to sort out where do I go to my course site and where do I find my lessons page with all my modules and how do I submit to gradebook or assignments tool. That kind of navigating is a little challenging for them. So next slide. Around your course plan, just some nuts and bolts ideas here. I've divided it up with when, what, where, and how around integrating engagement, skill development, knowing what we know about this generation. So in the bottom right-hand corner, what I'd like to highlight is your course content, if you're developing online right now, is really important to be short, frequent, and modular. So if you have a lessons page, say on your online course site right now, it's great to chunk everything up and create lessons pages that really lead the learner through the content, or short snippets of videos that you deliver yourself, embedding perhaps other multimedia content into the site, and directing them through the kinds of things of when they engage with the material and when you're asking them to go and do some other kind of activity. Now, at this time, we're all pretty much certain we're going to be online to some extent in the fall. And so what I'd like to suggest is, even if you're developing these kinds of interactive activities, skill development focuses on your online course, that you can still continue those either going hybrid or going face-to-face down the road. So they're of value. So think about this in a 3 to 5 year window if you're going to introduce something. Have a central, very kind of one-stop shop home base with the platform where the students go. And then on the what side, try and connect your learning objectives to skills. So in the past, what I've had is something that's been to the effect of, a learning objective where you demonstrate mastery of the concepts of the course, or are able to increase your knowledge and about X subject matter by, demonstrating mastery and knowledge in tests and exams. Now what I do with learning objectives is I build the skill in, because this again is about the learners wanting to know what's in it, what's happening, being very clear on instructions, having some kind of, what's the utility of what I'm learning in this course going to give me, what is it going to be for me? So if your learning objectives identify the skills as well as how they connect to the subject matter, I think that would be really clear for this generation of learners. So something like building oral communication competency through an online verbal presentation on a course topic. And so you've kind of got a lot of pieces happening in that one learning objective. Okay, the next screen, please. So I'm going to try and share a few examples of what I do with online. And there wasn't a lot of time to actually get into specific types of engagement, whether they be discussion forums or whether you kind of run virtual types of group discussions or case debates, and if those are run independently by students or by your TAs or you moderate it. It all depends on large and small classes and what you have to manage. But I'll come up with a couple here, and we can kind of look at different ideas if questions come up. So returning to the learner, I think the pieces that they're looking for when they are in your course, whether it's online or back face-to-face or in hybrid, is choice, autonomy, and meaningful connections. And where that really hits the road is not just in your lectures and online or your lectures face-to-face and how you map them out and work through content. It's really in the assessment. So on the right-hand side, I've got a few ideas here on trying to integrate those pieces into how you do an assessment. So let me just take the example of doing forum posts, we call them, or discussion posts in an online course. Now, I've used this tool in a hybrid course, and I've used it in a fully integrated online course before COVID hit that I converted from face-to-face. And the complexity of learning is if you were to use something like this or some other assessment tool that you want engagement, or just an assessment that requires engagement to get it done, is what level of complexity are you asking? I think you need to go to the more, synthesis, extension, analysis of material, and maybe use other means of recall, recognition, or covering subject matter in other kinds of assessments, so that you can really attract what this Gen Z would like to do. I think it's also helpful to be accumulative. So in discussion forums, I am directing the students with a very specific question. I am asking them to integrate an academic source in their post, but I'm also limiting their length and so on, so they're concise, which tends to be the way they like to think anyways. And then I have them do an initial forum post and then a reply post to appear, so there's an accumulation of what they're working on in that module and the posts they're doing to discuss that topic. So a lot of pieces of work are building or connecting to each other. Now, I also in the course draw on the forum posts for a final paper. So everything they do all term with discussions now become important ways or sources of content for a final paper. And the reason I am able to do that with accumulation, so now I'm up to about 75% of the course is all tied into this one kind of interactive exercise, is because the regular, frequent forum posts require academic sourcing, and I direct the depth of it through questions. So then the paper at the end, rather than saying being a traditional research paper with a certain amount of academic sourcing in it, I give worth to the knowledge that all these students have created and co-created through the term as a valid pool of knowledge and understanding that they can use for the papers, because over the course of the post, they've done more academic referencing than I'd ever get in one paper at the end. So I give I ask them to use their posts and their peers' posts as sourcing in the final paper, knowing the academic discussions there already. The other piece to all this is if you were to do some kind of discussion assignment that's interactive, when you assess, you might want to do more assessing the process around the skill development of executing and working with the subject matter than the actual performance of, say, a case debate that you did, and drawing on that. The last couple pieces work together. So I've mentioned already the need to help with skill development, scaffolding, and supporting students so they can succeed at an assignment, depending on the skills they need to execute it well. Otherwise, it's the skill set that's the limitation on their performance, not necessarily their understanding of the subject matter. And giving value to this. So I learned the hard way when I just did discussion forums with this 2 forums for every week and interactive dialogue and posts and so on, because I gave it 25% value for my final course. And by that time, colleagues were given 5 or 10% for discussion forums. This was all before COVID. And when I did a formative feedback with the students in the class, I learned that they thought it was worth much more than that. And in fact, felt it was worth, I'm now at about 50% for this kind of work. But I've got 10 modules, 2 posts a module, it's 20 posts. So it's over 2 marks a post. So that, again, it's what's this generation seeing as value for the time they're giving. And so I had to do that. The next slide. Now, coming back to you as the instructors and trying to make these kinds of changes in your course, taking in everything we just heard about Gen Z and a few ideas about engagement and skill development in a time where you're kind of online thinking you're going back to face or will land in the middle, is doing this for the sake of also building your academic portfolio. Because when I give presentations at Brock, I always have to message and say, how is this valuable to your portfolio? How does it build your teaching portfolio? And what I've noticed is a recent report that's just come out from Deloitte on the state of higher ed coming out of the pandemic, and reading the tea leaves about the bigger institutional setting in which we operate. And they're claiming there's going to be accelerated innovation coming out of the pandemic and because of the pandemic. and universities having to manage costs and pedagogical demands. So we're going to have this hybrid kind of structure to us as the institution evolves. At our level, we're dealing with a lot of experimentation with the online that's been kind of thrust upon us, and probably, depending on how we feel about it, looking at where we're going to go back with our own course delivery around the hybrid idea online or in class. So I encourage you to grab as much feedback and track what you're learning around this as much as you can. So a couple more slides to conclude here. Anytime there's something about doing a different development in your course that takes a lot of thinking and a lot of planning and a lot of experimentation, I always go back to this analogy of the Chinese bamboo tree. One day I was sitting in the arena while another parent was reading this book, and he's a school principal, and I asked him what it was about, and they were doing their, start of the school season motivational convention, and he had to read this, and it's about unleashing the potential in teams and individuals, but they were reading it in terms of unleashing the potential of learners. And the analogy that Greg Bell uses about the bamboo tree, where it takes 5 years to grow, you have to water and fertilize the tree in the ground every single day, and it doesn't break through the ground. You keep watering the bamboo until finally at some point it grows 90 feet tall in 5 weeks. And the question is, did it grow because of the 5 weeks, or was it the 5 years? And we have to trust that what we do to help learners, we may not see the reward from that. We certainly won't see it at the end of a term when we teach our course. And we just have to trust that we'll just keep watering the bamboo, commit to this idea of skills and engagement, and know it's going to help these learners get into the workforce. We may not see when that aha moment of them growing 90 feet and doing well out there happens, but we had a part in it. So the next slide, please. So I just wanted to say thank you very much. And for our own sakes of watering the bamboo, make sure you keep drinking lots of water. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Julie and Kim. Very fascinating, very interesting learning about Gen Z and sharing all those strategies as well on how to connect with them. So please use the chat and Q&A window to share your questions. Start adding those now. Julie's the author of the new first Canadian edition of Business Communication, Developing Leaders for a Networked World. If you'd like to take a look at this resource, please reach out. I'm just about to drop my email address in the chat. Send me any questions as well. And we're going to get to the questions right now. Kim, this is one for you. How does Gen Z define purpose? Oh, you're on mute, Kim. Here we go.
Unmute. That's an excellent question. I wish I had a scientific answer for you. I have a more social answer for you, which is how do I create the best community that I can, and how do I drive myself forward to succeed in an ethically friendly way, in an educational way, and in a friendly way. So I guess they would have a different purpose for education, a different purpose for social, but for education, absolutely very driven. If there's something specific more you're wanting for purpose, please let me know. But I would say absolutely very driven, and I mean, in a different way than a millennial, I would say. Driven more in a community-minded way than in an individual way.
Thank you, Kim. Julie, here's a question for you, and apologies about my noisy second grader who's in gym class right now. Julie, for those of us who aren't social media users or aren't comfortable with some of the platforms that are being used by Gen Z, what do you recommend on where to start?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm just like you. I'm not comfortable myself on those platforms. I keep a division between my personal and my professional on those. So again, this co-creating and helping you design your assignments, what I would recommend is decide if you're talking about this to deliver your course content through social media, in which case, is there any policies? Is there any privacy rules? That kind of thing, because you'll be stepping out beyond your course site or your classroom setting into more of a public forum. But if you mean to actually integrate social media and how students do assignments, then I would ask them on the ones and start simple, maybe one particular platform, or where they make suggestions back to you on platforms that could relate to an assignment and where they'd like to kind of produce the work and create the work.
Thank you, Julie. There's another one here for you. How'd you handle it if your class has a blend of different generations? So it's mostly Gen Z, but there's also different students from different age groups. How do you try to engage everyone? What are some strategies you can share there?
Okay, let me give you maybe one example. If you were to have them do team-based work, of course, so working teamwork skills, working with others is one of these employability skills with Conference Board of Canada. What I would probably do is, again, it's about them appreciating the different kinds of strengths and preferences of each other as they work with each other. So I would probably have an orientation component that I build into my class to get them to know each other and to identify those kinds of things. So different skills that they would like to develop, different preferences and tendencies as different generations. I think having a conversation and bringing those out to recognize then informs everybody on how you kind of proceed. So I do spend a lot of time with this kind of scaffolding, getting to know everybody piece, both for myself and others. But at the end of the day, there's universal skills that even if you've got this more mature student in your class versus someone straight out of high school, that I think you can still find a steady way to proceed and not worry about having to be so customized.
Thank you. Julie, some of the strategies you shared during this presentation, are they covered in the new textbook?
Thanks for asking about that. So the fundamentals are definitely covered in the textbook. The textbook is a business communication textbook, so it gives the principles of business communication. And one of the really interesting pieces I like about it that would help with some of your assignment ideas or activities is the end of chapter components, where we have like very specific application exercise, like all different kinds of categories of exercises that you could pull from. And it'll probably give you, several different options on assignments. So yes, it is. Thanks for asking on that one.
Thanks, Julie. Kim, I have a few related to your sources for great info about Gen Z, and also if Gen Z for international students, if some of those similarities cross across different cultures. So it's a kind of a two-part, I guess. Some of the sources you can share would be helpful.
Absolutely. I would love to, as a follow-up, I can definitely share all my sources. I had that on the last slide. International, that's a really good question. That's a totally different research study that we've been doing. And how does Gen Z cross cultures? Absolutely, it does. And when I think of the student groups that we've had in focus groups, very diverse groups, and I think that the viewpoints are yeah, I think they go right across the generations, and we see the same types of, that empathy, the creating a community, looking for positivity, when we're talking about purpose in the other question, this, this lifelong go forward strategy of positivity and progress. And you look at how, if you're marketing to a Gen Z, for example, whether it's North American or international, it's the Gen Z viewpoint is, what does that company stand for? Is this a company that I can relate to personally? Do they have the same culture as I do, as far as, positivity and my community and, where I want to live my life in a more positive space? I think that absolutely it crosses cultures and definitely very purpose-driven.
Thank you. We have come right up to time. We've unfortunately run out of it. So thank you again so much to Julie and Kim for a really, really engaging session. Tons of great info. You're going to receive an email soon with a link of the recording, as well as a survey link. We'd love to hear your feedback with the session today, so please take a moment to fill it out. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions or connect with your local account manager. We hope you enjoyed the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. And on behalf of the team at McGraw Hill, thanks again, and hope you have an amazing day. Thank you. Bye.